Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous security monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. ProXPN is the leading VPN service, offering free accounts, excellent premium features, and an outstanding commitment to privacy and security online. Use the discount code WEEKLY and save 50% off for life. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email contact@netsparker.com. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all of observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns in application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today.
Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. This is the security news for this week. What happened with Yahoo? Oh, good Lord. Could the news be any worse for Yahoo, I guess?
I think the answer is no, because I think the deal is gone or going.
So who was going to buy them? It was
Verizon.
Verizon, and now they're like, no way, because basically they found out that 3 plus years ago, they lost 1 billion user accounts. And apparently there's a flaw that lets you impersonate cookies and log in as anyone's Yahoo account.
So the funniest response I saw to that was, there was 1 billion people that used Yahoo?
No, there was 1 billion accounts.
1 billion accounts.
Not necessarily users, right? That's really bad.
So is that all we're going to say about Yahoo and just move on?
Yeah, like what else?
What can we say?
What else do you say about that? I mean, it's bad for Yahoo. I mean, is this the death of Yahoo? I don't know. Will they recover from that? How do you recover from a breach like this?
We shall see.
Yeah. Wait and see what happens to Yahoo after this.
I mean, have we had in the world a major company of the type of like Yahoo that just kind of folds? Not to say that Yahoo's going to fold, but where do they go when they're not?
Like, where do you go from here?
Where do they go from here?
Perfect example of cloud.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cloud email. And other services.
Doesn't get any worse than that. Although I think losing a petabyte of data is pretty bad too. I mean, it's along the lines of losing 1 billion accounts.
Yep.
Like, how do you lose a petabyte of data? Well, I guess if you don't... Australia's tax office, nonetheless, has lost a petabyte of data. That's like, how do you not see a petabyte leaving your... I don't know.
That's one of two things. Either the guy that leaked it very slowly across a lot of months, or they really suck at monitoring their traffic. Like, hey, we're super slow. What's happening? Because that's a lot of data.
I like the ridiculous articles that are like, that's 1,000 terabytes, which is 20,000 dual-layer Blu-ray discs, or 500,000 hours of HD streaming. With all that data, you could watch Sharknado 3 on Netflix over 333,000 times.
Now,
Put that in perspective for people who don't know what a petabyte is.
From the point of view of the attacker, that's a lot of data for you to handle. Also, parse, manipulate, grab, cut, do whatever you want with it. That's quite a large chunk of data for you to exfiltrate and then store and process.
But you can do it while watching Sharknado.
That's right.
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
And put it in the cloud and do machine learning on it, I guess.
But that's a good question. What do you do with all that data?
I don't sell it little by little. I don't know.
Maybe it's like storage wars. Hey, I've got all this data. You want a chunk of it?
Yeah.
I'll sell it to you. I don't know what's in it.
You auction off like chunks of it, like storage wars.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what
You need a big-ass NAS to store all of that.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in the cloud.
I'm sure it is.
And it's encrypted because they paid for that feature.
So I love this lines from this article, which I just think are funny. So the Talk data breach. There's a 17-year-old was given a rehabilitation order. I'm not sure how you rehabilitate a hacker, but maybe we'll find out, as you say, Jeff.
I thought you were going to say, how do you rehabilitate a 17-year-old?
A 17-year-old hacker. So they gave him a 12-month rehabilitation order, and he was told, and I quote, "Your IT skills will always be there. Just use them legally in the future." Which I just thought was just a funny quote. Like,
we should ask Kevin Mitnick, about the rehabilitation experience.
That's right. Or Sammy Kamkar, or something.
It can be done.
Oh, Carlos and Jeff, what did you guys think of this Netgear vulnerability? Did this come across your desk, Carlos?
Yeah, it crossed my desk. I found it that, it's serious, but overhyped. Especially since it is on the internal interface, and the person doing it needs to know that you're actually running a Netgear to be able to target you. So they'll have to write some custom code to get you to click on it, to execute, to then connect to it. So that's why when I look at the attack matrix of all of the different steps that I have to go through to pull the attack versus the cost and value, I think it was a bit exaggerated. But other than that, it is a valid one. It is a valid vulnerability.
But what about these devices just hanging off the internet with no protection from the external interface?
External interface. I was only looking at one. External interface. That's a serious one.
Yeah.
If it is exposed to the internet, yes.
Yeah, and you wonder how that happens, right? Like, do users just enable this, and you wonder what the percentage is?
It's a feature.
I guess Shodan could tell you how many are exposed to the internet. I didn't see the figures for that.
Is it the default configuration, or does somebody has to do something to make it vulnerable?
Correct.
Yeah, a lot of people I know, because for some reason my family and neighbors think I'm their IT guy, especially when they're buy a new freaking router. A lot of people actually do not know how to. It is a black box to them that they just plug in. And they look at a sticker, look at what is the password on the sticker, and that's what they stick with. Mm-hmm. That's what they use. Some actually go in and modify it, but other than that, they stay with what is on the sticker.
Right.
It's a black box for them.
So the exploit was pretty simple. You just plug the router IP /CGI-bin /, and then you can run commands. Interesting, Netgear was still working on a fix. Apparently they had beta fixes available. The workarounds were interesting because you could use this to run commands to turn off your web interface, which then would come back once you rebooted the router. But if you turn it off, attackers can't run commands to reboot the router, which it was discussing. There was someone, I forget his name, who wrote a really good article about it. Better than the one I had in the show notes, I apologize. If you check my Twitter feed, you'll see a better article that had some of that updated information in it. Of course, if you kill the web server, you're not going to be able to manage it through the web. And manufacturers usually don't give you by default SSH access or Telnet access, because it would probably be Telnet access if they give you access, right? What's also interesting is we have one of these model routers here in the studio, and I was like, oh, I may be able to test this vulnerability, and then I'm like, oh, but I put DDWort on mine, which isn't vulnerable to this attack, which I think is a much better workaround than turning off your web server. Just install DDWort, although that takes some level of skill to be able to do that. So I found it interesting that the recommendation from CERT was, it says that it is currently unaware of a practical solution to the problem, with the only viable workaround being that users discontinue use of the routers until a fix is made available from Netgear, was CERT's specific recommendation, which concerns me that there was...
download the fix.
Yeah. Well, but that's concerning for a lot of reasons.
Well, that tells me the fix is too they view the fix as too complicated, too complex, too convoluted.
To recommend to users.
Rather than explain it, just turn it off.
I guess it's viable alternative is the key word there. Viable for the users, as Carlos said, that view these devices as a box. They just plug in and go by what's on the stickers on the outside.
Right.
Obviously, my top recommendation would be DD-Wort.
First, you might argue that people that view it as a black box are not probably reading this and saying, "Ooh, I wonder. I've got that.
I've got a Netgear R7000."
So there's some
it doesn't
number
even
of
say,
them out there that people are clueless that they.
It doesn't even say Nighthawk, which is the model included with this. Because I had to think about it. I'm like, R7000. I think I had to think about it. I'm like, that's a Nighthawk, and then I looked up my Amazon purchase history, and I'm like, oh, yeah, it's a Netgear Nighthawk R7000. I'm like, oh, I have one of those. But DD-Wort is definitely not that DD-Wort's never had a vulnerability, but
other than the fact that you're lazy and you don't like to make the changes, so in that context, you are a typical user.
True.
You're not the typical user.
Right.
That's going to know what kind of gear they have and is going to take the time to track it down. Does this impact me?
Right. And
That's
go, I should put
DD-Wort
consumer on here, or I should disable external access from the internet to my management interface. Yeah.
I still have seen a couple of Note 7s out there. So people, regular users, are not too aware about technology news.
Yeah. No, it's very true, Carlos.
They need to tune in to our show. And
That's
we
right.
will enlighten them.
There was two interesting studies. One says survey finds many enterprises lack tool skills to protect networks. The other one says that ransomware hits more users in the U.S. than any other nation. And I just found
those are studies.
What? You needed a study to say both of those things? Like, really?
Well, you said earlier you want just the facts.
Just the facts.
And facts are backed up with scientific proof.
Scientific proof. I mean,
analytical study. So it's fact.
The U.S. has more technology and internet-connected devices than any other country. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. Therefore, we can probably assume that ransomware is going to be more effective in the U.S. than any other country, just by the first fact.
But you can't be sure.
So you got to do a study about it.
You have to do a study.
The other one that many enterprises lack tools and skills to protect networks. That I can't even. Did we need a study? I guess my thing is just be careful when you read these studies.
Well, does the study have a recommendation like?
There was a company that did the study called Tripwire, which.
Okay.
But you find the security, and no offense against Tripwire. I mean, their marketing department got on our radar, so their job, mission accomplished. That's good.
Yep.
But take these with a grain of salt. Obviously, we know.
And buy Tripwire.
And I guess buy Tripwire. Sure, we'll give them props. I wonder who sponsored the ransomware one. Malwarebytes? I want to say it was Malwarebytes.
Well, let's not give a false story. Let's have nothing but the facts.
It was Malwarebytes.
It was Malwarebytes. Okay.
Okay, so be careful what you read. That was the purpose of those two stories in there from me.
So the answer to your question is studies that seem to be blatantly obvious are
usually
very often marketing efforts.
And blatantly obvious marketing efforts. And nothing against Tripwire and Malwarebytes. I mean, whatever. I mean, if they come on our radar on Enterprise Security Weekly, it might be a different story. But in this light, they did some marketing. This article, Jeff, I want to ask you about specifically, and Carlos too. American and British spy agencies targeted in-flight mobile phone use. And they cited some. Now, I thought you shouldn't use your phone on the flight. So that was my first thing about this article.
No, you can use them now.
You can.
You're just supposed to disable the
but they're referring to the phones that you used to see in the back of the seat.
Oh. Gosh, when was the last time I've seen a phone on the back of the seat?
That was the kind of phone that they were referring to.
So documents provided by Edward Snowden. The quote is, what do the president of Pakistan, a cigar smuggler, an arms dealer, a counterterrorism target, and a combating proliferation target have in common? They all use their everyday GSM phone during a flight. That's in the opening statement of the article, and then goes on how NSA reportedly monitors cell phone use in planes. I want to know what the cigar smoke. What was the cigar smoke?
So from a different perspective, this is sort of in the same vein as really you needed to do a study for this.
Yeah.
Really, intel agencies were taking advantage of monitoring technologies that are sort of up for grabs because you can argue you're outside of whatever boundaries that you're.
That's an interesting way to look. Is that why it was happening? Because it's outside.
Because it's fair game.
Outside of jurisdiction where.
Yeah.
Maybe
wiretapping.
Maybe possibly.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way I see it is just this kid again trying to get some attention and trying to put out their news to get himself mentioned and get some airtime. Yeah, why not? If they're not doing it, I'm going to say, why aren't you doing it?
I want to know what the cigar smuggler was all about. I want to know more about that. Where was this
it
person?
was Cubans.
Was he smuggling cigars from Cuba in the U.S.? I mean, that would be... I mean, if you think about it, there are legal ways to get cigars into the country. Are they smuggling non-Cubans or Cubans? I would imagine it would be smuggling Cubans.
Probably.
Because you don't really need to smuggle other cigars into the...
Unless you're just trying to avoid tariffs.
There have been cases, actually.
Right.
We actually interviewed someone who was under investigation, but then cleared, essentially was accused of tax evasion, essentially, of getting cigars in and not paying taxes on them.
Whatever
importation
the reason
taxes,
it was probably economic in nature.
Yeah. He was acquitted of all charges, but obviously smuggling any Cuban cigar into the U.S. Outside of whatever limits have been imposed by current President Obama, they've actually been lifted. You can actually, because it changed over time, you can take as many cigars as you want now from Cuba into the U.S. if you're traveling there.
There's still a limit. There's a dollar limit.
There's still a dollar limit, but it used to be a very small dollar limit. Now the dollar limit applies with...
Or it might be an amount. The number 100 sticks in my mind.
No, he lifted all specific restrictions. Now it falls under any general restrictions of like what you can take back into the country.
But it's,
in other words,
it's still limited to people outside the country bringing in whatever they can bring in. It's not. We haven't completely opened up.
Correct. Yes,
I can't go down to
you're correct.
I can't go next door and go buy a Cuban because they're not allowed to sell them yet.
There's still an embargo. But if you travel to Cuba, you may bring back as many cigars as you like within whatever legal limits there are.
We should do a road trip.
We should.
And just go to Cuba, spend a few hours, collect as many cigars as we can, and bring them back.
And again, there is some general, 50 boxes or whatever limit there is that's not imposed specifically on. Before, the regulation was imposed specifically on cigars and said you could only bring back a certain dollar amount, which was like $175.
In 2017, we should take Security Weekly on the road.
We can go to. We could legally travel to Cuba. In fact, my business partner on the cigar side went to Cuba and brought back cigars and shared his experiences and stuff, and it's very interesting. But
that'd be fun.
Not really related to this article, but that was a fun discussion. Anyway,
well, you brought up cigars.
I did. Well, the cigar smuggler thing got me.
But suffice it to say that intel agencies, NSA in particular, I'm the most familiar with, they do as much as they can within the bounds of the law.
Right. Tenable got a new CEO. I actually had that in my stories. It didn't make it into the wiki, but in some of my other stories, Tenable gets a new CEO. Given that Jeff and I used to work for Tenable, Carlos still works for Tenable, I thought that was kind of
so Carlos should comment on the new CEO.
No.
Carlos is not cleared to comment. Jeff and I can say whatever we want, but no, I thought that was interesting news.
Interesting news and interesting selection. Probably a really good choice, I think.
His name is Amit Yoran, former RSA president and founding director of U.S. CERT. Set to lead Tenable effective January 3rd, 2017.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Congratulations to Amit. We have a very long history with Tenable.
We do.
They'll be a sponsor next year.
I have a long history with Amit. He used to, his first company was a company called Riptech, and they used to subcontract work for a firm that I worked with 20 years ago. nearly 20 years ago. So he's come a long way. He's done well.
What was the other thing I had in here? Yahoo admits has been hacked again. We covered that one already. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Anything in the news?
Well, what else?
My
is
stories
in the
were
news this week?
my stories were. Automation. We didn't talk about automation.
Yeah, let's talk about
this
automation.
was interesting. I agree with the title. I somewhat disagree with the analogy in the execution, but I feel like I don't want the message to get lost because I agree, but in a different way. Of this, the article written by Josh Thurston. He makes the analogy to automation like you have in a dishwasher. He makes that analogy very heavily through the article. Mm-hmm. I don't think the analogy does the concept justice. I think there absolutely needs to be automation in security. The way it was presented, I somewhat kind of disagree with. He talks about your systems getting dirty and manually cleaning up after an infection takes time, whereas you can automate that process. Mm-hmm. So, there were some points that I agree with, but I just thought overall, in general, it might give the wrong impression that there was no talk of the downside of... Sorry, Jeff. I'm hashing on Jeff. There was no talk of the downside of automation, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that I still have to clean my dishes off before I put them in the dishwasher, right. And you wash things in the dishwasher.
If we're going to do the dishwasher analogy,
let's do that.
It's always bugged the crap out of me, and my wife never listens to this show, so I'm fairly safe here. We buy, top of the line dishwasher, but I basically have to wash the dishes before I put them in the dishwasher. Yeah, and I'm like, the whole point is
to have the
dishwasher does the dishwashing.
Yeah. And it doesn't do for me. And if you do, like all the food goes in the bottom and it gets all clogged up.
Right.
And then my dishwasher stopped working one day, and I had to take it all apart to realize that there was all kinds of objects caught in the bottom of the dishwasher preventing it from working, mm-hmm. including a piece of glass, which I caught myself on. So how's that for automation?
Well,
so automation can hurt you.
So it sort of goes back to our discussion earlier with Dave Shackelford. There's sort of the inevitable automation is necessary. There's so much technology these days. There's so many devices. There's so much data flying around. You have to automate. There's no, I'm a firm believer in, manual's the way to go because that's how you really know what's going on and that's how you trust what you're seeing. That's how you know your network. But you got to use automation. I think it's the wise and educated use of automation and knowing its limitations.
Yes.
Knowing it's...
Well, and back to the dishwasher analogy, those big pots and pans that fill up your dishwasher really quick, you wash those by hand. Some things you have to soak overnight to get clean. But the plus side with the dishwasher, having an infant in the house, was about 6 months, a lot of bottles that need washing. The dishwasher has a sanitize function.
Right.
I can fill up a lot of bottles in the dishwasher and sanitize those bad boys all at once, and that's awesome.
Right. So it's understanding the capabilities, the advantages of automation.
Yes.
But also understanding the limitations.
And the nipples. It sanitizes the nipples.
Exactly. So what's the analogy? What's the analogy in networking to nipples?
Nipples and bottles.
Nipples and bottles.
Sanitizing. I'm not sure.
We'll come up with something.
Where I like automation, and Jeff and Carlos too, working for vulnerability management. What I always would love to see, and I think maybe some utopia, but maybe, then based on Dave Shackelford's conversation, more of a reality is, there's software that can identify vulnerabilities in lots of different aspects, not just Tenable's products, but, Tenable and the vulnerability management community, we can identify vulnerabilities, but automating the fixing of those vulnerabilities, however you do that, whether it's an integration or directly from some vulnerability management for smaller organizations does automate the fixing of those vulnerabilities. That's the automation that I like to see. I always felt like I had way too many vulnerabilities to take care of, so let's automate. I knew Carlos.
It's risky. It's risky. Just take into account how. In what month have you seen a Windows update being deployed that hasn't screwed certain number of systems?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On what month in the last 2 years?
Maybe March.
Well, what keeps this industry alive?
For example, this Patch Tuesday, If you decided, oh, I'm using Windows 10, I'm so secure, I'm going to include in my Windows 10 credential guard, and I'm going to enable it. And so all of my credentials are in their own small hypervisor space and protected. Well, a large chunk of machines, when you install the patch, that broke. Mm-hmm. So you no longer have that protection. In addition to other issues, I've seen issues where even Windows Update is broken, and then they say, "Oh no, but we're releasing a patch for it via Windows Update." No, you don't get it. Windows Update is broken. How do I get the patch? Mm-hmm. Oh, you need to download it manually, and you got to go through the steps of deleting this data in this folder, rebooting all of this stuff, and then you can get it. And go like, crap. Same for some web services. That is one of those where I would say if you're going to add remediation, it has to be in a very targeted way where you can actually add also some type of unit testing or at the end where you could say, let me deploy it to this 10 host, and here are a couple of unit tests that I'm going to run to make sure that my systems are running correctly, and then if those pass, I'm going to deploy it to others. That kind of automation I would like to see, but I don't think we're going to see it in a product. That level of automation with unit testing.
Yeah, I think we need to, as a community, embrace automation a little more in security and consider it more than I think we have in the past. It does come with its caveats. We need to keep those in consideration, but moving forward, I think we need to seriously embrace automation as best we can. Like the dishwasher analogy, I think as we found out is a pretty good one, right? It's good at some things. We understand its limitations, and we use it in our overall daily processes.
I see it like the automated machine guns that you see in the Korean DMZ. Right now,
that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, South Koreans have some very, very, very nice automated turret guns in the DMZ. But at the very end, it needs a human to click on the on a pad to authorize it shooting at the targets that it detected, tracked, and it's aiming at. Mm-hmm. Because you may never know if it is a civilian or not. It will simply auto-target those, and they have those safety measures applied to it.
Right. Yeah, this is the analogy I make way too often on the show, but basically it boils down to people, process, and technology working together. And there's an automation component in there, but it still requires people. I thought it was all
about the technology.
It's all about the information.
Exactly. But so, yeah, at the highest level, I mean, what keeps this industry afloat is the fact that there's technology out there. And automation is just another form of technology. Right. It's vulnerable to misconfiguration, misuse, misapplication, the false sense of security. You think it's working and it's not.
Forgetting to put the soap in the dishwasher.
Yeah, I mean, there's so the dishwasher analogy I think is starting to make more sense.
It is. It's the more we talk about it.
It's an illustration of great technology, automation, but it's not a set it and forget it. It's a tool that takes you. It helps you to get somewhere where it's hard for you to get on your own. So automation, like so many things in technology, think of it as a tool, and it has a purpose, it has a function. Don't overuse it, don't misuse it, don't misapply it, don't overly rely on it, and don't forget what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, that the tool helps you get there in a little bit more efficient, timely, cost-effective manner, and hopefully.
It would be unfair to pick on, what was his name?
Dishwashers?
Josh,
it was something like that.
Because I've learned over the years that a lot of times when you write an article for some of these blogs, you're limited in words too. So a lot of times the authors are like, yeah, that's what I was getting at, but I'm limited. We have the luxury that three of us can discuss it as long as we like.
Well, so. Not as long as we'd like.
Well, yeah, because we do have to end the show. But
we've got other things perhaps to talk about.
No, we don't. We're going to end the show on that note.
We're not even going to talk about the other big 800-pound gorilla in the room.
What's that?
Week.
Russia?
Russia.
Oh, do we have?
It's supposed to be 400.
What's that?
400 pound
400-pound hacker.
400-pound hacker.
400-pound hacker. That's right. I'm sorry.
I just don't think we have enough fact.
Well,
maybe we do, but that information
I'll
is
update it in the
obscured.
wiki later. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I've heard several news sources today. Apparently, the New York Times put an article out today that's very lengthy and very detailed, and is a worthwhile read on the topic.
It's not full of opinion.
Yeah, WikiLeaks actually said that they admit that some of their data came from Russians, and a tweet. Assange admitted that recently.
Interesting.
But then again, I think I'll stay away from it. I have some very prominent friends in the industry that are threatening me if I keep talking about politics on Facebook that they're going to unfollow me, that I should just accept that Trump won and deal with it. So I'm just going to stay away from it.
Well, without getting deeply into the politics of it, one thing I think is interesting that maybe we discuss at a later date, but it seems like what has become a big deal, at least in the press and the media, is attribution.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, I don't really care who did it. The fact that it happened, to me, is the bigger deal than who did it. Who cares who did it if some force, some entity, some adversary or not, manipulated the system, did something to the system? I think that's a problem that needs to be discussed. I don't care who did it, but it seems like the emphasis and the focus and part of this is because of the media is who done it.
And I mean, I think a lot of times you're never going to know who. I think it could be the case that it's being perceived that one party did it.
No.
When it could be that that's what everyone wants us to believe. Like, you don't know who's funding who's backing who. Maybe it makes more political, and not just this case, right? But any case of a big hack, it could be countries have vested interests. And you know what? It's better if the U.S. thinks that you did it rather than me, so let's conspire together.
Now, Paul, for a very long time, I know that one of the discussions in the hacking community has been about impact. Oh, cyber war and all of this stuff. What is the impact of it? And we've kind of put it like, oh, no, you cannot blow up a power plant. And then it comes out that, yeah, you can actually blow up a power plant. And we have been thinking about, oh, they're going to go after the power grid. They're going to be going around all of this stuff. But when we look at history right now of when has it been employed very effectively, I would say that, yeah, the Russians have been kind of like the leaders of it in terms of like what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Georgia, what happened in other scenarios, in the terms of affecting civil services. And in this case, if it was the Russians, it is a great psyops type of operation, because what they're trying to achieve is to actually discredit the democratic process and cause turmoil. And just by us discussing it and discussing the attribution and everything that the media is discussing and the freaking newspapers and everybody talking about it, we got this from an anonymous source and a leak. You're just that is feeding this turmoil, and they have succeeded. They're if it was the Russians and this is their end game, they're clearly succeeding on it. And it also serves as a template for other types of other countries and other types of operations. Let's say that right now in Argentina, there was a very large discussions about the machines. It went into their Congress. The guys from Immunity presented, several very high-end hackers that presented. Echo Party went over there and they presented. And one of the things that they argumented was like, we cannot trust these machines because all of the code was written by a private company. They modified that code and they refused to make that code open in terms of how everything's being tracked, and they're not giving away any details. And one of my favorite, well, I forgot the name of the Argentinian hacker. My favorite part was when he came in with a USB drive with all of the information from the senators that he was able to get from one of their web pages, just to show how easy a real world attack can actually be.
Right.
And they prevented it. That the machines are not going to be used for their elections, and they prevented that because it was that trust in the process is so important. It is just like when you're dealing with your backups. If I'm able to put a piece of malware, and you don't know, and you're not able to know when I put that piece of malware, and you know that it is in your backups and it is destructive, now I've hit your confidence on those backups. Same thing with information. If I'm able to tamper information, confidential information, or other types of records, I've just discredited that to a certain degree. And that goes a long way. We typically focus on data being stolen and data or destruction or denial of service, but we don't give a lot of attention or focus on the integrity and credibility of the data or the process around it.
So a couple thoughts on this. I don't know how we're doing on time.
30 seconds.
45 seconds.
That's my fault.
I do think it's important attribution in the sense of the impact of national security and our posture and our policy in the world. I think it is important. I think part of what's the concern is that we have tended in the industry to, or in our society, to point to the nation state as, how can we protect against that? There is no defense if somebody's focused, which is actually a really important issue. The fact that, for the most part, the breaches we're familiar with, all the attacks that we've known about that have made headlines, have largely been targets of opportunity. Nobody was particularly going after a particular company. But they were trying their techniques. They had this stuff that they could use, and it happened to work there. So what can they do with it? We don't do a good job as a whole industry in what happens if somebody like a nation state actually wants to go after your company. Most of our security defenses fall down because we focus on the wrong thing.
But there's always been targeted attacks.
There has, but we don't focus on them. We focus on the targets of opportunity, the low-hanging fruit, if you will. We as companies and organizations that are trying to do security, we don't like to think about all the things that could happen. We focus on the few things that we can kind of get our arms around and hope for the best, and we call that risk. Just to tie it around to what we started the conversation with in this segment, Yahoo. Have we talked about who stole the data from Yahoo? No.
They said it was a nation state, but yeah.
Well, but that's not been the focus of the discussion. The focus of the discussion has been that amount of data has been lost by a large company that has put the sale of that company in jeopardy and perhaps has killed it, which was their exit strategy. So it's costing somebody a lot of money, the fact that it happened. And it doesn't really matter who did it.
Right.
It matters that it happened. And we're not having that same discussion about this other thing that with and it's the government and it's the election process.
Well,
I'll leave it at that.
After the show, it's the after party. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back next week for our last episode of the year, and then we'll pick things up in 2017. But make sure you tune in next week to Paul's Security Weekly. Over and out.